Have you ever experienced a night so terrifying that it changed your life forever? Imagine being home alone with your younger sibling, only to hear desperate knocking on your door, and when you check, there's no one there. This is the story of how an ordinary evening turned into a haunting mystery that still leaves us with unanswered questions and lingering fear. In this video, I'll share every chilling detail of that night, the frantic knocks, the eerie shadows, and the sense of being watched that never went away. What would you do if you felt someone, or something, was trying to get into your home? Stay with me as I recount this harrowing experience and its lasting impact on our lives. If you love real-life horror stories and spine-tingling tales, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you won't miss any of our latest chilling stories. Let's dive into this unsettling experience together. Just a week ago, something happened to me that I still can't explain. It all started on a Friday night when my parents went to a concert. They left around 9 p.m., leaving me and my younger brother alone at home. It wasn't unusual for us to be alone, we were used to it and always followed the rules. Our house is pretty big, with my brother and me sleeping on the second floor. The second floor has our bedrooms, a bathroom, and a small living area where we like to hang out. Downstairs, on the first floor, lives our grandmother. She has her own little apartment down there, complete with a kitchen and living room. Even though we all live in the same house, it feels like we have our own spaces. That night was just like any other. After our parents left, I made sure all the doors were locked and the lights were turned off. My brother and I settled in for the night. We watched some TV in the upstairs living area, played a few games, and eventually, it was time to get ready for bed. The house was quiet and calm, just like always. We brushed our teeth, changed into our pajamas, and said goodnight to each other. My brother went into his room, and I went into mine. Everything felt normal and safe, like it always did. Around 10 p.m., I was lying in bed, scrolling through my phone, when I heard it. Someone was knocking on the door. At first, I thought I was imagining it. But then the knocking came again, louder and more desperate. I got up and looked out the window, but there was no one there. I felt a bit uneasy, but I tried to brush it off. I thought maybe it was my grandmother playing a joke on us. She likes to have fun and sometimes pulls little pranks. I called her to ask if she was the one knocking on our door, but she told me she wasn't even home. That made me feel a little more nervous, but I didn't think too much of it. I went back to bed, trying to forget about the knocking. But just a few minutes later, I heard it again. This time, it was even more frantic, like someone was desperately trying to get in. I looked out the window again, and just like before, there was no one there. I decided to call my mom. She picked up quickly, and I told her what was happening. She sounded worried and told me not to open the door for anything. She said it could be dangerous and that they would be home soon. Her words made me feel a bit better, but I was still scared. I put on my headphones and tried to go to sleep, hoping the music would drown out the noise and help me relax. I was starting to doze off when my brother came into my room. He looked scared and said he heard the knocking too. Before I could stop him, he ran to the door and opened it. There was nothing there. Just the empty hallway and the darkness beyond. My brother looked confused and a little embarrassed. He closed the door and went back to bed, but I could tell he was still shaken. So was I. The house felt different now, like something had changed. As I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. The calm and normalcy of our home had been replaced by a heavy, oppressive atmosphere. I didn't know what was going on, but I knew one thing for sure. Something wasn't right. Around 10 p.m., as I was lying in bed scrolling through my phone, I heard a sudden desperate knocking on the door. It was loud and urgent, like someone was in a panic. At first, I thought I was imagining it. Maybe it was just the wind or some other noise. But then the knocking came again, even more frantic. My heart started to race. I got out of bed and walked over to the window, which overlooks the front door. I peered outside, expecting to see someone there, but the doorstep was empty. The street was quiet, and there was no one in sight. It didn't make sense. Who could be knocking so desperately and then just disappear? I felt a bit uneasy but tried to brush it off. Maybe it was my grandmother playing a joke on us. She had a quirky sense of humor and liked to prank us sometimes. It seemed like something she might do. So I decided to give her a call and see if she was behind this. I grabbed my phone and dialed her number. After a few rings, she picked up. Hey Grandma, were you just knocking on our door? I asked, trying to sound casual. There was a pause on the other end, and then she replied, No dear, I'm not even home right now. I went out to visit a friend. Her words sent a chill down my spine. If it wasn't her, then who was it? I thanked her and hung up, feeling more anxious than before. The fact that she wasn't home made the situation even creepier. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was just a random person who had knocked on the wrong door. But deep down, I knew that wasn't it. I went back to my room and tried to calm myself down. I got back into bed, but I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. The house was quiet again, but it felt different. The normal sense of safety and comfort was gone, replaced by a lingering sense of dread. A few minutes later, the knocking started again. This time, it was even more frantic and desperate. It sounded like someone was trying to break down the door. My heart pounded in my chest as I got up and went to the window again. Just like before, there was no one there. I decided to call my mom. She picked up quickly, and I told her what was happening. Mom, someone keeps knocking on the door, but when I look, there's no one there. It's really scaring me, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She sounded worried and told me not to open the door for anything. And whatever you do, don't open the door. We'll be home soon, as she said. Her words made me feel a bit better, but I was still scared. I went back to bed and put on my headphones, hoping the music would drown out the noise and help me relax. I tried to fall asleep, but every little sound made me jump. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. As I lay there trying to calm down, I kept thinking about the knocking. Who could it be? Why were they so desperate? And why did they disappear every time I looked? The questions swirled in my mind, but there were no answers. I just wanted my parents to come home so I could feel safe again. The night seemed to stretch on forever. I kept my headphones on, trying to block out the noise and my own racing thoughts. I hoped that whatever was happening would stop and that things would go back to normal. But deep down, I knew that this was just the beginning of something much more frightening. After the first incident, I tried to convince myself that it was nothing. Maybe it was just a random person who had the wrong house or some kind of prank. I got back into bed and put on my headphones, hoping the music would help me relax and fall asleep. Max, my dog, lay at the foot of my bed, his presence comforting me a little. Just as I was starting to drift off, I heard it again. This time, the knocking was even more desperate, louder, and more frantic. It sounded like someone was in serious trouble, pounding on the door with all their strength. My heart started to race, and a cold sweat broke out on my forehead. I sat up in bed, pulling off my headphones. The knocking continued, echoing through the quiet house. I got up and went to the window again, peering out into the darkness. Just like before, there was no one there. The empty doorstep and quiet street made the noise even more unsettling. My fear was growing by the second. I felt a knot in my stomach and my hands were shaking. I knew I had to do something, but I wasn't sure what. I grabbed my phone and decided to call my mom again. She picked up almost immediately, her voice filled with concern. Mom, it's happening again. Someone is knocking on the door, and it sounds really desperate. But when I look, there's no one there, I said, my voice trembling. There was a brief silence on the other end before she responded. Listen to me carefully. Do not open the door, no matter what. Keep it locked and stay inside. Your father and I will be home as soon as we can, as she said firmly. Her words were serious and filled with worry, which made me even more scared. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Okay, I won't open it. Please hurry, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. She assured me they were on their way and to stay safe. I hung up the phone, feeling a mix of fear and relief. At least my parents were coming home soon. I went back to my room and sat on the edge of my bed, trying to calm down. The knocking had stopped again, but the silence was almost worse. It felt like the whole house was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I kept my phone close, ready to call for help if I needed to. Max was still lying at the foot of my bed, but he seemed more alert now, his ears perked up and eyes focused on the door. His presence gave me a small sense of security, but I was still terrified. I didn't know who or what was outside, but I knew I couldn't let them in. I put my headphones back on, hoping to drown out any more noises. The music helped a little, but I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined the desperate knocking and the empty doorstep. It was like a bad dream that I couldn't wake up from. As the minutes ticked by, I kept glancing at the clock, willing my parents to come home faster. The fear was gnawing at me, making it impossible to relax. I kept telling myself that everything would be okay once they were back, but the dread wouldn't go away. The night seemed to drag on forever. I stayed in bed, headphones on, trying to ignore the fear that was creeping over me. I just wanted the knocking to stop, for everything to go back to normal. But deep down, I knew that whatever was happening was far from over. I tried to drown out the noise and my own fear by putting my headphones back on and turning up the music. I just wanted to forget about the knocking and fall asleep. I pulled the covers up to my chin and closed my eyes, hoping that the next time I opened them, my parents would be home. Just as I was starting to feel a bit calmer, I heard footsteps coming down the hallway. I took off my headphones and saw my younger brother standing in my doorway, rubbing his eyes. What's going on?" "I heard knocking," he said, looking confused and sleepy. I quickly sat up and motioned for him to come closer. Someone's been knocking on the door, but there's no one there." "Mom and Dad said not to open it," I whispered, trying to keep him calm. But he looked worried and curious, which made me even more nervous. Before I could stop him, my brother turned and walked toward the stairs. "Wait, don't." I called after him, but he was already heading down. I jumped out of bed and followed him, my heart pounding in my chest. I had a bad feeling about this. He reached the front door and paused, listening. There was no sound now, just the heavy silence of the house. Maybe it's Grandma," he said, reaching for the doorknob. "And no, don't open it." I yelled, but it was too late. He turned the knob and pulled the door open. We both froze, staring into the empty hallway. There was no one there. The night outside was still and dark, and the only sound was our own breathing. My brother looked back at me, his eyes wide with confusion and fear. "But I heard it," he whispered. I quickly shut the door and locked it, my hands shaking. "I told you not to open it," I said, my voice trembling. He nodded, looking scared and embarrassed. "I'm sorry. I thought maybe it was just a prank or something," he said quietly. We stood there for a moment, both of us trying to process what had just happened. The house felt different now, even more unsettling than before. The air was thick with tension, and I felt a chill run down my spine. Something was definitely wrong. "Let's go back to our rooms," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. We headed back upstairs, and I made sure to lock my bedroom door. My brother went back to his room, and I could hear him moving around, probably trying to get comfortable again. I lay back down on my bed, my heart still racing. The unease was stronger now, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. The knocking, the empty hallway, my brother opening the door, it all felt like a bad dream that I couldn't wake up from. I put my headphones back on, but it didn't help. Every little noise made me jump, and I kept imagining someone standing outside my door, just waiting. I pulled the covers over my head and tried to block out the fear, but it was no use. Sleep was impossible. The night dragged on, and I kept checking the clock, willing my parents to come home. I just wanted to feel safe again, but that feeling seemed so far away. The house, which had always been a place of comfort, now felt like a place of fear and uncertainty. After that night, the atmosphere in our house changed completely. It felt heavy and oppressive, like a dark cloud had settled over everything. The usual warmth and comfort were gone, replaced by a constant sense of unease. Even during the day, the house felt different. Strange things started happening that we couldn't explain. At first, it was just small noises, creaks and groans that seemed louder and more frequent than before. We tried to brush them off as the house settling, but deep down, we knew something wasn't right. One evening, as I was sitting in the living room, I saw a shadow move out of the corner of my eye. I turned quickly, but there was nothing there. I felt a chill run down my spine and tried to convince myself it was just my imagination. But it kept happening, shadows moving where there shouldn't be any, just on the edge of my vision. My brother started noticing things too. He would hear whispers when no one was around and see flickers of light in dark corners. He tried to act brave, but I could tell he was scared. We both were. Our once safe and happy home had become a place of fear. Every night, as I lay in bed, I felt like I was being watched. It was an intense, unsettling feeling that made it impossible to relax. I kept my headphones on, trying to block out the sounds and my own racing thoughts, but it didn't help much. The fear was always there, lurking in the background. Even Max seemed to sense that something was wrong. He would growl at empty spaces and refuse to go into certain rooms. His usually cheerful demeanor was gone, replaced by a nervous energy that matched our own. Having him close by was a small comfort, but it wasn't enough to chase away the fear. My parents noticed the changes too. They tried to reassure us, saying it was just our imaginations, but I could see the worry in their eyes. They started leaving lights on at night and checking the locks more often. It helped a little, but the oppressive feeling remained. The strange occurrences continued. Objects would be moved or knocked over when no one was around. Doors would creak open by themselves, and the unsettling noises grew louder. The house felt like it was alive, and not in a good way. It was as if something was trying to make its presence known. One night, I woke up to the sound of soft footsteps outside my bedroom door. I lay there, paralyzed with fear, listening as the steps grew closer. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. The footsteps stopped right outside my door, and I held my breath, waiting for something to happen. Nothing did. After a few minutes, the footsteps retreated, and I finally exhaled, my heart pounding. I didn't sleep at all that night, too afraid of what might happen if I closed my eyes. The sense of being watched was stronger than ever, and I couldn't shake it. As the days turned into weeks, the fear became a constant part of our lives. We tried to stick to our routines, but everything felt off. The oppressive feeling in the house made it hard to focus on anything else. My brother and I were always on edge, jumping at every little sound. We talked about moving, but my parents insisted it was just our imaginations. They said things would get better with time, but I wasn't so sure. The strange occurrences showed no sign of stopping, and the heavy, oppressive feeling only seemed to grow stronger. I knew we couldn't go on like this forever. Something had to change, but I didn't know what. All I knew was that our home was no longer a place of safety and comfort. It had become a place of fear and uncertainty, and I didn't know how to make it better. Even after all this time, I still can't shake the fear that settled over our house that night. The strange occurrences, the oppressive atmosphere, and the feeling of being watched have left a lasting impact on me and my brother. We try to go about our daily lives, but the memory of that night and everything that followed is always there, lurking in the back of our minds. Every time I hear a creak or see a shadow move, my heart skips a beat. I know it's probably nothing, but I can't help the fear that rises up inside me. My brother is the same way. He's become more quiet and jumpy, always on edge, always looking over his shoulder. The house that was once our safe haven now feels like a place of dread. We've tried to talk about what happened, to make sense of it, but there are no clear answers. Why did the knocking start that night? Who or what was trying to get in? And why did everything change afterward? These questions haunt us, and the lack of answers only makes it worse. My parents have tried to reassure us, but even they seem unsettled. They don't talk about it much, but I can see the worry in their eyes. They've taken extra precautions, like installing more locks and keeping lights on at night, but it doesn't change the fact that something strange and frightening happened in our home. I've thought about telling more people, hoping that someone might have an explanation or a solution, but I'm afraid of being dismissed or not believed. It's hard to explain the fear and unease that has taken over our lives without sounding paranoid or crazy. Despite everything, Max has been a constant source of comfort. His presence makes me feel a little safer, but even he seems affected by the strange atmosphere in the house. He's more alert and protective, always on guard, which in a way, makes me feel both safer and more anxious at the same time. The feeling of being watched hasn't gone away. Every night, I lie in bed, listening for any sign of trouble, my mind replaying the events over and over. Sleep doesn't come easily, and when it does, it's filled with restless dreams and nightmares. The sense of security I once had is gone, replaced by a constant state of vigilance. My brother and I have grown closer through this experience, but it's not the kind of bond one would have wished for. We're united by our fear and the mystery of what happened that night. We support each other as best we can, but the weight of the unknown is always there, pressing down on us. I don't know if things will ever go back to the way they were. The fear and unease have become a part of our daily lives, a shadow that follows us everywhere. We've learned to live with it, but it has changed us in ways that are hard to describe. Sometimes, I wonder if we'll ever find out what really happened. Will there ever be an explanation for the knocking, the shadows, and the oppressive feeling in the house? Or will we be left with these lingering questions and unresolved fear forever? For now, all we can do is try to move forward, hoping that time will bring some clarity or peace. But the memory of that night and the days that followed will always be with us, a reminder that sometimes, the most frightening things are the ones we can't explain.